I realized one thing that I neglected, our community. I'll tell you now, because that's exactly what it's here for. That's the slide I was looking for. We have a group on the Humanities Commons, which gives us, we have a blog that shows some of our latest news, community-related news, such as conference appearance and events like this. And we also, this is where we share a new case study, such as Andrew's video that he presented on earlier. He did a recorded version of that for us. And we also have a discussion group, which is just getting off the ground, where you can join for support, to network with other people. The same idea as this. We want you to be able to reach other users and get help, get inspiration. So I hope that, I'll actually not, I hope, I'll demand or encourage that you all go join it. Because if you've ever started a community, you know that it's a Sisyphean task where you're just trying to get it off the ground. So I'm begging everyone, just go and join. You're not going to get emails or anything there. It's low traffic, so you can just log in Humanities Commons and check it as you like. It's hcommons.org. The group name is MusicID Community. And if you're not familiar with Humanities Commons, it's a really wonderful networking resource to get in touch with other scholars throughout the humanities. There are a ton of great groups. It's a good place to find conference announcements, to share some things that you're working on and get feedback. So it's a really nice community. And now let me shift over to my browser. So I will start by just going to the MusicID page and showing you how you can do something. Okay, I see there's a question that you don't see the login portal on the URL provided. Okay, I'll put you on to talk if you need extra help. If you just go to, well, let me share my browser and I'll come back. I've lost my, no, there. So if you go to musicid.acad, no, sorry, musicid. My fingers are not cooperating. musicid.academicrightspress.com. So I'm already logged in, but what you should have is a blank screen that pops up with asking you for your credentials. If you didn't get that, you might have pop-ups, something suppressing the pop-ups. I'll see if I can log out and log back in so I can show you what that looks like, in case that will be helpful. Sorry, it's very difficult to juggle all of these tabs during a virtual presentation. Okay, let me go back to the browser. So if you go new session, musicid.academic. Oh shoot, I'm still logged in. If you still need help logging in, here, type it in the questions and hopefully Paul can help you out. I'll move on here. Let's see. There's one question for Vegeta Johnson. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I really enjoy it. You've had a lot of questions and comments for us, and I'm really happy to have the interaction. She has a question about how we deal with a shifting chart organization. That's a really good question, and I will answer that after I've gone through this short demo, because that's something you'll also have to think about for just a second. So to start out, let me lead you through one of the little case study examples that we like to use. We just put out another video about this recently, which is about basically Nirvana versus Michael Jackson. We like this one because it gives you a really good short capsule of how to use the system and what you can do. So I'm going to walk you through the steps of how you basically do the background research to create the case study. And again, please jump in at any time with any questions. And then after I go through the short demo, which should only take 5-6 minutes, hopefully, I'll be open to all of your questions if you want technical support, detailed questions. So we'll be here to discuss whatever it is that you need. So to find this topic, a scholar that we were working with in Canada was researching basically how grunge versus Michael Jackson. So I believe that to start out, she was looking at the success of Michael Jackson's Dangerous. So there are multiple ways that you can do searches here. The easiest way is just a keyword search, which will find it in the title field as far as the database is concerned. So dangerous. In this case, you can see there are some artists that have danger in the name. You find them, and you'll also see any albums called Dangerous and any singles. Right now, let me warn you, this data is slightly messy because we just had an update to add a lot of things to the system, and unfortunately, a few things got duplicated or a little bit out of sync, and I hate that that's present, but our administrator is working on that very hard, so I know it'll be cleaned up soon. But basically what you're looking at is you've got the title, you're going to scroll down and look for the artist that you want. So here, Dangerous Michael Jackson. If you look after, you can see the catalog numbers and the record labels to help you identify a particular release if you're looking for a certain reissue or a certain country. But in most cases, you don't need to worry too much about the specifics. For me, I'll choose the US, so that's this one. You can choose as many as you'd like to. I'll just show you briefly. If I picked all of these things from completely different artists. Why am I using my trackpad when I have a mouse? Sorry, click next. And, oh, I'm sorry, this has changed. Okay, please ignore what I just said. All right, so what we do, since I chose Dangerous, what it's showing me here is essentially all of the chart history worldwide for the album Dangerous. Let me go back and select just one thing to be sure I've got a clean set here. So Dangerous, Michael Jackson. Even if you choose Sweden, it shouldn't matter. It should show you all of them, but I'll just choose 2. Next. Yeah, okay, good, that's the same. Just wanted to be sure. So what you've got is all of the history for this particular record. We've got 3 main views: artist view, record view, and individual chart date view. So here, for the artist views and the record views, you're going to be looking at the same kind of table, but the basic organization site-wide is the same. You're going to see the table of all the data here. By default, it goes to the USA and chronological order. You can see here first charted date. This is the first release, 14 December 1991, going up to one of the reissues in 2009. So Michael Jackson's death, that was in Sweden. So these are catalog albums that are showing up. So if you want to compare different countries, this is a great way to do that. You can choose as many things as you want to see how they compare. We've got Australia, Great Britain, and the United States already selected. This is showing you the full life here in the graph above. So starting from 1991 up to 2010. So that means that it hasn't been in the charts since 2010, at least as far as these 3 countries or these 3 charts are concerned. It's probably been some download and streaming charts. But for the mainstream Billboard 200, the last charted date was 2010 sometime. If you hover over it, it'll show you. So it was last on the chart, Friday, July 16th, 2010. If you want to focus on a particular area, you just click and drag over with the mouse, and then you can zoom. But what we want to do right now is go to the chart date to see what else was happening. So to do that, I click on the name, Billboard 200, and this takes me to the individual day in the Billboard 200. So it first charted 14 December 1991, and that's what we're looking at here. We have the top 10 albums in the list. On the left side menu here, this tells you the name, this tells you the date. You can use this to navigate forward and backward a week. And that's the chart position limits here. It starts out with 10 just to keep things loading quickly, but you can expand up to as many as you would like. And so this is all showing here. So what you're looking at in the table is only this specific day. So on the 14th of December, if you were to go to Billboard's website and look up their chart, for the Billboard 200 chart for this date, this is the same data that you would see. I believe they've actually very recently updated their archive to show you the weeks in the chart. I get confused between the British and the American chart sometimes on that. It used to not tell you always the full history, but now they're getting better at doing that. but it's not making us redundant because this is still more helpful. If you've ever used enough of the Billboard websites, it's an incredible pain to navigate. Official charts company is a little bit easier, but still, it's laborious. But what you can see, if at a glance, this is what you can't do with the publisher websites. You can reorder this data. For viewing purposes, you can just alphabetical by artist or by recording. What I want now is position, so I'm going to go back to that. But if I wanted to know of the top 20 things on that day, which ones reached number 1, I can click peak position. So I can see these top 7 reached number 1, and this is how many weeks in chart they had. And so you can see there, and also do in descending order. Likewise for weeks in chart, if you want to see which shortest or longest, you can do this. So this is very helpful for finding some things quickly if you're limited to certain position ranges or date ranges or and things like that. Okay, let me go back to position. So what we've got selected by default are these top 3. Dangerous debuted at number 1, so that's number 1. That's the start green. When you see this long line like this, that is just showing you that there is no position for all of this time, but there is one at a later date. So for example, this berry colored line, which is Garth Brooks' Rope in the Wind, it stops. So it did not come back to the Billboard 200 after this date, which was, sorry, I'm terrible at mousing over this lately. My hands are shaky. I'll come back to that. But so what you can see is that the Dangerous did come back to the Billboard 200 for 1 day, 2 days actually, 2 separate days. December 11th, 2009. So that must have been right around the time he was sick or died. And then later on, again, in July 16th. July 16th, that was around his birthday, I think. So that might have had a small resurgence. But there's an example of some of the ways that you can use chart data just as kind of a trigger for points to pursue in your research by looking at some of these curves. I'll look at it more closely here. You see an event happen, something happened to bring it back up. So that gives you just a quick window into here's something interesting that happened that I can pursue further in my research because it might be relevant. But let's zoom in closely here. Let me check quickly to see if you have any more questions. Sorry, I am awful at juggling all of these windows. Okay, great. Okay, good. I'm glad we were able to get you sorted out, Joe. Go away, Zoom windows. Sorry. Thank you for being patient. I hope you're being patient with me out there. I appreciate your comments as we've been going. As you all know, over the last year, things being virtual introduces quite a few challenges that you don't normally have in these kinds of presentations or workshop settings. So it's very strange for me also just to be kind of talking to myself to the computer and not sure how many people are listening. There could be 2,000 people, there could be 2, I don't know. But returning to the task at hand, thanks for bearing with my tangent. So the day that Dangerous came out, you can see quite a big variety of artists here. The 90s are pretty famous as being an era that's not monoculture. I mean, arguably that's true for any decade as a historian, but especially for music in particular in the 90s, if you lived through the 90s, as I was a 90s teen, there were a lot of hugely different things going on. And this particular moment in time, the end of 91, beginning of 92 is kind of considered when some of the 80s presence in the chart died and what we would consider 90s music had really taken over public consciousness. And you can see a little bit of the 80s stuff in here. So we got Prince, the New Power Generation, even though that's, New Power Generation is his 90s band. Genesis, so there's, We Can't Dance. That's another, something you would consider maybe an 80s group. Of course, this is the synth pop, adult contemporary incarnation of Genesis. But at a glance, just looking at the lines, you can see that compared to these top three, Michael Jackson, they all did well. But you can see he had a rockier road in some ways. But on a whole as the metrics, depending on what you're looking at, there's so many different ways to quantify or qualify success in the charts. If you've ever looked at some of the milestones from Billboard, you know that if you're looking at number ones, there's 20 different kinds of number ones. There's most simultaneous singles at number one, most singles to reach number one, most songs to be at number one for longer than 10 consecutive weeks, and on and on and on and on. So finding barometers of success is not an easy task. For me, having these visualizations helps. But just at a glance, again, you have multicultural here. You've got Michael Jackson, Garth Brooks, and U2. So U2, again, persisting from the 80s, but of course they continue to be hugely popular through the 90s and into the early 2000s. I mean, they're still popular, but in terms of dominating airtime. So these are three wildly different genres. This Garth Brooks album is actually the first country album to debut at number one. And if you look at impact, which I'll show you here shortly, Garth Brooks is one of the most successful artists worldwide, actually, of all time. But in short, what you're looking at here is Michael Jackson was as successful as you would assume. When Dangerous came out, there was an enormous PR campaign. You might remember when the black and white video came out, it was aired simultaneously in 40 countries, a huge, huge number, exactly the same time worldwide. It had millions and millions and millions of viewers, was the largest TV event at the time. So they had a lot of publicity. There's no arguing that Michael Jackson is extremely successful. But she wanted to know how this up-and-coming, the scholar who discovered this, wanted to know how the up-and-coming phenomenon, in this case Nirvana and grunge, compared with the person who was kind of the reigning king of mainstream music, popular music, just, nothing was bigger than Michael Jackson. So we add in Nevermind, which is this dark blue line. And you can see also from the list of weeks and chart that it is already twice as successful as Dangerous was. Let's zoom into this. And I will get rid of Garth Brooks and U2 for the time being. Zoom back in. So just at a glance, you can see kind of a layout of their commercial reception and how it may have been impacted by certain public events, news. The Nirvana, you can see, debuted pretty low. It was 144 in October of 1991. But through word of mouth and through the festival circuit in particular, they gained success after playing the Reading Festival, if I'm remembering correctly. They all of a sudden surged to number one. And if you want to look at this top range here more closely, you can go to this drop-down menu. This isolates by peak position. So we'll look at the top 10, zoom back in, make it more spread out. And you can see that for one glorious week, Nirvana was number one over Michael Jackson. They knocked him out down to number 5, I think. Yeah, number 5. And then Nirvana was number one. So they had a little bit of interplay here. We'll go back out to the full history. And I'll drag this range on the bottom here to show you more of this life cycle. So we're looking at July 1991 to July of 1994. That date is shown up here in the right corner. You can drag that date around with this bar. That's sort of the most fine-tuned way, but you can also use these quick buttons here. Year to date, all time. You can pick one particular month, which is not so useful until you've already gotten a starting point. So go back to all, isolate. And you can see that immediately the Nirvana album was in the chart for twice as long. But interestingly, it was close to dropping out at the same time that Dangerous was. However, it had a massive spike right here, which is April of 1994. Yes, end of April, which, as you might remember, is the month that their singer Kurt Cobain committed suicide. So, of course, this, unfortunately, dying is good for your brand. So this brought them back into the mainstream in a huge way. So we can only speculate how the success would have gone if he had survived. But okay, so here we have somewhat of an interesting discovery of that somewhat niche new genre that was taking over the decade. We managed to overtake Michael Jackson, who is very wide-ranging mainstream appeal. With all of these other genres that are happening in the chart at the time, if you start adding them in, you might expect that some of them are also niche appeal. For example, the Garth Brooks. So you think country music, maybe that's just a small group of people. But no, when you look at it, actually, it did better than the other albums. It was in the top of the charts for longer, and it was in the chart for longer than Dangerous. On the other hand, let's put in MC Hammer. I'm curious how that compares. I'll get rid of Dangerous for a second because they're both green. So yeah, this type of line here, I think is pretty common for things that are a little bit faddish, like MC Hammer was. It starts out very strong and then tanks, and this just dies. But we'll go back to Dangerous. So if you put in some of these niche items, someone put in Metallica here, expecting it to be slightly more limited appeal, but actually what you find out is that it did way better than anybody. This is actually, I think it was Metallica's first album to debut at #1. To date, it is still far and away by a huge factor their most successful album. This is their self-titled album, Metallica, which is also called the Black Album because it has a solid black cover. This is the album that had Enter Sandman as a single, which is like immediately getting distracted by nostalgia because I remember that's the first Metallica song I ever heard as a child watching, I think, VH1. I saw the Enter Sandman video and I liked it when I was, 10 at the time. And so that was my introduction to Metallica. So I did very well for them. Certainly that could suggest some of the impact of music videos at that time, which of course grew over the 80s, but were maybe not fully expected for everyone until early 90s. But immediately you can see in the chart, even if you don't know how many weeks, you can see that it was on the chart for much longer than even Nirvana, which is pretty astonishing because Nirvana became completely mainstream. If you scroll down to the table, you can see it had 285 weeks in chart. It peaked at #1. On this particular day that Dangerous came out, the previous position had been #7. At this week, it's #8. So that's a pretty normal, small up and down. And the peaks and valleys, let me talk about those quickly. I know for me, like thinking about longevity here, we've got Metallica had 285 weeks on the chart, so even longer than Nevermind. And it's hard for me to immediately divide that into 52 and see how many years that was. But you can see here it terminates January of 1997. So it had 5 full years on the chart. But looking at these peaks and valleys, you can see the impact. I mentioned, of course, Kurt Cobain's death here. The Michael Jackson one becomes very interesting. I'll get rid of the others. Because there are 2 little humps here. So this particular one, when it comes back up, this is February of 1993. So this is when he did the Super Bowl halftime show. And this was the first halftime show to feature like major top 40s pop artist. Before then, it was marching bands, maybe some kind of nostalgia acts, oldies, so nothing that was a huge draw. But you can see this had a huge impact on his record sales. Similarly, this little hump right here, this is August of 93. This is a normal reaction. You peak, kind of taper off slowly, and then that's normal. It probably would have continued to sink. But at this time, in August of 93, this is when the first allegations of molestation were raised against Michael Jackson. So we can see that it actually had a positive impact on his sales. Why we can only speculate, could just be having his name in the news. Perhaps people wanted to support him, who knows. So at that time he had a bit of support, but then getting into October, November, after September, the trial, I believe, began in September. And then you can see it drops off pretty sharply. So I certainly cannot answer whether this is just the natural decay of the life cycle or whether the trial had any impact. But my impression with these little humps is that It seems like it only helped him, but of course this is only speculative. Let me come back for just a moment to your comments. If you have any questions where you'd like to speak, please feel free. I'm not interested in only talking to myself. I'd love to have you on camera if you don't mind. Okay, no official Q&A, you're in the chat. So chat's fine, anywhere I can find you. Let me show you just a couple of quick technical points first, and then I can get into some of your questions, just to show you a few of the capabilities here. Two important things. First of all, the ability to export information. When you have a graph, whatever you're looking at, whatever is showing here, you click export graph and it will save a JPEG, which I can't show you because I don't have that window set to share. But so we'll save it. If you zoomed in to that part, that's what it would look like. It saves exactly the same image. And likewise for this tabular data. You click export data here, you will get a spreadsheet that has everything you're currently seeing. So if you have it limited to 20 positions, you will get 20 positions in your spreadsheet. If you want all 200, you'll need to expand to the 200. So just bear that in mind. But the more important thing for me, you can also hide the graph or show it as you like if it's in your way. The more important thing is that you can add things to a clipboard. So when you're going through comparing different countries, if you want a short list of records you're looking at, you can compare anything at all. You click this plus sign and it adds it to your clipboard, which shows up here in the lower right-hand corner. And then you can navigate through absolutely anything that you want. It will stay there. Let's go to prints in the new power generation. This is a good example because it shows you one thing you'll need to be careful about in data literacy, for not just for this platform, but for anything, because computers are kind of dumb. If you type in prints, like this is particular, prints has so many names anyway. But the way the system is going to show you exactly what you type. So if you type, I'll do a search to show you. Let's just add, sorry, this prints error is especially not safe for work. I'll just add get off because that's on the top there. Okay, that adds us here. You can compare anything. If you want to look at another country, I will show you that next too. But if you want to look at different prints iterations, if you just type prints, this is where you have to be very careful about some of the naming conventions. So we have just prints. Here, look at these list of countries, shows you the countries for which we have data available for charts. Usually if it's duplicated, it is just a duplication. Every once in a while, there's a mistake where something could be not included here. For example, do I see New Zealand in this list? Yeah, I do actually, I see it there, but I'll just click both of those to be safe. So if you go here, look at Prince's full history, what you've got is, it defaults to singles for the United States, and then you can click here to choose albums. So you're seeing that this Prince albums, but this isn't, even though this is the United States, this is a short list. There should be a lot more here. That's because of these strange naming conventions. So anything that was cataloged in the charts at this time as simply Prince is listed, and you can navigate around by clicking these different things. If I want to see all of the history for the single musicology, which of course is a favorite of mine as a musicologist, then you've got it here. You can see that it charted United States, Great Britain, Germany, and then on these additional charts in these countries. Yes, this is the album, not the song. We'll go back. If you go back, it will just reset to the default, which is singles for the United States. So if you're wanting to find a specific album like this, where the naming convention can be tricky for the artist, it's better to search for the title. If I want to know what Purple Rain came up under, then, because that's Prince and the Revolution. So yeah, we have a Prince and the Revolution. You can have ampersand in the Revolution, the word and. So be very careful about that. If you're looking for something and you don't see what you expect, it could be because of this. Sometimes it is an error, and please do if you write to us if you find a problem. But for the most part, it should just be normal user literacy issues that we all have to deal with. But pick one, you should be able to find all of the countries. In this case, I didn't, but anyway. You can add all of these things to your clipboard here. If I want to see what else was happening in Switzerland at that time, I can click this. Oh, the Jacksons were in there, Elton John. Okay, quite an interesting mix. And then what you do is save anything that you need to save that you want to compare. It doesn't have to be compared. Click to view in a new graph, and what it does is it creates a custom search, essentially adjusts these items. And your clipboard will stay constant. So if I click on an artist, I'll go to Jackson's. See, the clipboard is still here in this corner, so that you don't lose that as long as your session is still active, which you should stay active until you reboot the computer. But this is how I use the system a lot. If I have a whole bunch of stuff that I'm trying to compare, I just save all of it in my clipboard, and that way it if I want to compare things, I can compare them. If I have completely unrelated things, I just have them here on the short list, so I don't have to start a new search. So that's the gist of the data system. Let me get to a couple of your questions here that you've had. Oh, right. Right. Brigitte had asked earlier about how we deal with some of the different charts that have changed, like some of the what used to be called race charts. No, but were changed to R&B charts, soul charts. All of these things have changed names, and they've also been merged into the mainstream charts in some ways. How the MusicID system handles that is, if it was discontinued under a certain name, you will find the data up to the point where it was discontinued under that name. I don't have an example off the top of my head, but if they completely stop publishing it, you should be able to find it under that name. This is where I can show you the date search. So unfortunately, at this time, we don't have a list of, like a browsable list of charts, but if you wanted to find something, let's try something in the 70s. If you're looking for a particular chart, this is the way to find it right now. Let's try 72. Oops. Sorry, excuse my slippage in the scrolling. The United States, so for 1972, these are the 3 countries for which we have data. And then this will show you all of the charts that are available for that time. So hot R&B, hip hop songs. This is showing you the merged version. So at the time, of course, 1972, hip hop didn't exist. So the R&B chart was merged with hip hop and renamed later, but it was just renamed, but it's technically the same chart. So that's how it's handling it. I think he also had a question as to how the merging of charts affected artists. I believe he said, so that with the chart reorganization, it hurt some Black artists because they weren't highlighted anymore in the genre chart. And that's a good example of the kind of thing that you can use for research, because it's a little bit faster to find the information. So that is certainly a really great research point to pursue. Yeah, okay, great. So this is how you find the individual charts. I'm looking at chat just to make sure I'm caught up in your questions. Do any of you have any particular requests of something you'd like to be able to find? I could use this example of showing how the reorganization of the genre charts, like the R&B charts, had on the mainstream charts. Oh yeah, MC Hammer breaks through. Yeah, no, you're totally right. MC Hammer was actually huge for hip hop. I still have a soft spot for him. He, even though it's pop hip hop, he was definitely pivotal. He's huge absolutely huge for mainstream recognition. I can't remember all the details off the top of my head now. You might know, but I think he was the first hip hop artist with a #1 album. By this time is around 1998. You start seeing hip hop in the mainstream charts. for the first time. So by the early 90s, they had really grown in popularity, and especially thanks to MC Hammer. I mean, when I was a child at that time, I wasn't listening to Ice Cube, but I was listening to MC Hammer. So that definitely put hip hop on in my awareness in a way that it wouldn't have been, because otherwise it was outside of my purview as a white suburban child or country child in South Carolina. Not too much gangster rap going on for children then. Although my brother actually was a big fan of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, so he had those albums around, but I listened into them when I was 10. He was the first with a big multi-platinum hip-hop record, yeah. Yeah, and Jazzy Jeff. Okay, if no one has any questions about usage for data platform with anything, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Let me answer that really quickly of how you can, as an example of seeing how something might have been hurt by being merged into a mainstream chart. You can use the clipboard function, I think, for that kind of thing. So what you would do, if there were a particular artist you're looking at, in this case, I don't have one in mind, so I'll just look at the chart day. Let's try, oh, I'm looking at my thing here. So if I go to, okay, I didn't finish the search. So if I go to that date, to get rid of the clipboard, you just have to go down here and remove it. Okay, actually, here's a nice example of some weird things you can see that to be aware of. When you have a single dot, it just was in the chart for that one day. They can be a little bit hard to see when there are multiple items, so just be aware of that. The chart in this case has automatically zoomed into the position range, because of the 3 things that are selected, we only have 3 positions covered. It was their first day in the chart for all 3 of these records, and none of them had been out of the top 5. So what we're looking at here is the top 4 positions, and we just have the 1 little dot. So in this case, it appears that they just charted for that one day at that time, and then that was it. So yeah, always lots of interesting things here. There, sorry, I'm getting stuff. I'm a big 70s soul fan, so now I'm looking here like, yeah, there's some good stuff. So if we wanted to compare how something went into, I can't think of a good artist who would be there, but what you would have to do is build clipboards and also just kind of create some charts to export and compare. So for example, if you want to know Aretha Franklin's career, because she spanned so many decades, and she got into a little bit more of some mainstream 80s stuff in the 80s. So at the time when the soul charts were ended, so what you can do is, if we wanted to see what some of her most, we'll go to albums. Well, let's do singles. So we can look at peak position, everything she'd had that got to #1, and this is in the United States. We can see here, and you can quickly see a glance at the dates. So we have 2 in the 60s. Interestingly, 1 was on the mainstream chart, Respect, of course. And many of the others we see are the genre charts. So R&B, club songs, dance songs, adult contemporary. Yeah, that has to be an 80s one, 1987. And we can also see where she is in streaming charts now, so Spotify. But this is, I won't go through the whole research process here because that would take a very long time, but this is how you would do it. So look at here, you can see what she's got for #1s. You can just sort of pick things. You can see how long they were in chart. You can, what you could do is, oh good, that's working again. Yeah, you can sort by chart. So if you wanted to look at only things that were in the mainstream charts, you could select them, Hot 100. You could pick all of them. And then here, oh shoot, it's actually not sorting properly. Sorry, the alphabet here is functioning strangely. But you'll see there's some mainstream charts. Here's how everything did. And then you can clear that. Or actually, what you would do is export it probably because you're going to want to save it. I shouldn't have done that. Give me just a moment for the system to respond. There. And then you can look at some of these things that were only in the genre charts, and it will show you, those PDs are random, how their success was in comparison. So unfortunately, that example is not great because they didn't have a long time. But, oh, think, there's a big one. But not on that particular chart, at least for this release. So you would just have to explore in that way and then compare an artist at different times, different charts, look at the graphs, and also look at the tables, and you can see if they had more success in one chart versus another, and how the existence or non-existence of certain charts might have had an effect on their exposure. Oh, sorry, someone says the database is too fun. I'm really glad that you think so, because I think that it is. So anyone who's still with us, I'm sure, is a big nerd. So it's fun to play with. If there were no questions about using this, let me show you very quickly, so we don't go too much over time, the impact and revenue modules. These are accessible through this upper left corner. Here is the fastest way if you're already in the system. What you'll do is just click revenue or impact, and it will take you to those pages. But you can also bookmark these websites to use at home. These ones are not connected to the IP. So please play with those. There's impact. The addresses for them are just the same as the home database, musicid.academicwritepress.com, and you stick the name of the module in front. So impact or revenue. So first let's look at revenue, because this one is the most interactive. This is a calculation of the top 1,000-ish, usually 1,000, sometimes less, artist, songs, and albums by amount of money earned since the year 2000. On the homepage, what you see is the top 20 of all time. Sorry, I warn you, I always say all time, 21st century, I mean since the year 2000. So since, for the 21st century, this is showing you the top 20 songs. This is not something that I have used as much because I don't work with industry and I haven't had to worry about how much money things are earning. But at a glance, here, let me zoom in. What you've got is the artist, the song. This date range here is the dates for which it was in the charts, essentially. So the information used to calculate this is from the charts and also from the AFPI, so the industry reporting of finances. So this is showing you that it first charted in The Shape of You for Ed Sheeran, first charted January 2017 and has charted up to present. The system was last updated last year. And I know Steve is working on his current update, so this should be updated through at least this first half of 2021 very soon. So when you see something ended at March 2020, that's simply because that's where the data in the system ends right now. So you can kind of assume that this is to present. You have a short list here of its peak position in each of the charts for the source country. So these are the countries that he's using, plus Japan, to calculate things. And then finally, what you came here for is the indicative revenue. So indicative revenue is Steve's own proprietary units of measurement, so that he's been able to standardize the currency across time and across countries into units of revenue. So each one of these units is equivalent to $5,000 in $5,000 US dollars in the year 2000. So we'll need to adjust that for inflation now, because that will be having an impact. But essentially what you'll do is take that number, multiply it by 5,000, and that's how much money the whole thing earned. So in this case of Ed Sheeran, that gives us, I have forgotten the number, so I'll do the math real quick because I don't remember. 36962.519 units of indicative revenue, times multiply that by 5,000. And what we reach is $184,812,595. So you can kind of discard probably that last few dollar amounts, because it's not quite an estimation, but the numbers are very accurate. But since we don't have the actual financial report from the industry, as I know Andrew talked about earlier, these things are very closely guarded. So we have to do it this way to try to estimate, but we have run this through, sorry, excuse me. We have run this through some industry professionals and they have been impressed with how accurate it is. So you can get some interesting points for pursuit from musicology from that perspective, because you can see in 3 years, Ed Sheeran has earned more than Nickelback did over 13 years. So right there, there's the basis for a project to find out what caused them to have so much more success. You have something that started in the kind of pre-digital era. The iTunes wasn't around yet. I think that started 2002. And then something that was purely digital. So lots of interesting things to pursue. What you would do to navigate this system, you can go to artists, songs, or albums. If you want to look at top artists, this will show you 200 at a time up to 1,000. So click these left and right arrows. That'll take you to the next 200. So for all time, oh, there, okay, the 210th most successful artist of since the year 2000 is Depeche Mode, which is really fascinating. So that has to be a lot of catalog albums too. And if you want to look at the artist in depth, you can just click on a title. And this, what you get here is these handy bar graphs that show you some of the sales performance divided into albums and singles here on the bottom in green. These particular peaks are total combined sales for all albums or all singles. So he has these convenient labels to show you when something came out. So usually, of course, that will be the driving engine there. So you could assume, for example, when Delta Machine here came out, probably a lot of these sales are Delta Machine, but usually it affects catalog albums too. And you can export the data behind this file by clicking this link underneath. And what I can't show you the spreadsheet here, but it will show you, it divides up, it shows you 2 columns, one for albums, one for singles, divided up chronologically. The years are divided into, I think, 39 units. So it's almost data week by week, but not quite. And then when you're scrolling down the page, you will see a table. So all of the things that are in this table are not necessarily reflected here as far as some of these text labels go, but this information is included in the the source data for the plot. So even if it's not indicated, it's included in this calculation. So going down, you can see the top earners for Depeche Mode for albums since the year 2000 have been Playing the Angel is #1. Well, so that's interesting again. That got more in a year than Exciter did over 8 years. So that was their new album at that time in 2001. Similarly, you can click on these titles. It will take you to a graph just for that item, so you can see when that particular item was earning money. So the artist-wide bar graph is showing you all time, all albums, but when you look at the individual entry, you're seeing just this item. You can also navigate through dates. So we can go to October 2005 to see what else was out. You navigate, you can expand or narrow the date here. If I click 2005, this will show me all of the top albums for 2005. So for the whole year, Green Day had the #1 album with 77,547.8 units of indicative revenue. And if I want to look at individual months, I can do that. So say June 2005, System of a Down was the #1 that month, while the Green Day was down here at #8. So this, you can also go down to the day. I would have to ask Steve about the accuracy. I think you should probably take the days with a grain of salt. I don't think it will necessarily give you a high degree of accuracy if you wanted to look at the weekend something came out versus the second weekend after it came out. But the month by month basis is actually very good. So here you can get kind of an idea of what was selling more from month to month, and it can be interesting to see if something is maybe way down here a particular month, but #1 or #2 for the whole year. You can do the same kind of exploration with songs and artists. all organized by date, isolate down to a year, and choose a month, or choose a day, and so on. So that's the basis for this. I think the only information you can export would be that's under the plot, but that is the full data set for that artist. I think you can get it for the individual items too. So we'll go to Ms. Jackson. And again, if you want to know only the revenue history for this particular record, so here it's the single Ms. Jackson, you can download that here. So this is very good for if you're doing statistics, granular analysis for music industry, and so on. Finally, if you click About, this has all of the methodology, data sources, how some tricky issues are reconciled, and so forth. So this will be, I'm sure, very useful or interesting to many of you who want to know how he came up with this. And before I go through impact, which will just take me a moment, I will look to see if you've got questions. Someone is asking about pricing. Yes. Paul will be happy to help you with that. I'll go over a few of these things. Oh, thank you, Paul, for helping out with the questions. I see someone saying music and data, definitely nerding out right now. Thank you. I'm glad to be in the company of more nerds. Even though I'm not a data scientist, I have a certain train spotting tendency that as a musician and musicologist, the record charts are really good for just kind of filling that need to obsess over certain minute trivia. Right here. Okay, thank you so much for joining, Morgan. Yeah, we'll be in touch. I'll put up our contact information at the very end here. So within the next 5 minutes, we'll be wrapping up. I'm also tired of talking. I'm sure you're all tired of sitting and staring at your computers. But I want to show you impact very quickly. And if you want to know about subscriptions, we offer primarily to institutions, so we can be in touch with you. I'll send out a follow-up email after this to give you the handout to all the attendees, and this will also help you find out how to get in touch with us. And we don't have an individual subscription available at the moment, but I believe that is something that's in the docket. So if you are unable to convince your university or your company to subscribe, we might be able to. Anyway, basically, if you want it or you want your company to have it, contact us and we can work with you. We all want you to have data. Sorry, now I'm in a corporate mode, but for the most part here, I've just been in musicological mode. Yes, thank you so much, Brigitte. I appreciate all of your enthusiasm here. So lastly, I'll show you very quickly impact. Impact is kind of like the year-end charts, but it's for worldwide, all time. So Steve has done his own rankings, and I have found them to be pretty reliable. So of course they're subjective. He explains all of his methodology here. I do recommend as you look through the system to read through some of this prose. I know in my eagerness to just get to playing with it, I can ignore it and then I get confused. So if you find yourself lost, go back and read these paragraphs. They're very helpful. Steve definitely has not put text here unnecessarily. So these will help you navigate and help you find out what you're looking at and how some of these different lists differ. But basically what he's categorized is songs, albums and artists by year, by decade, by all time. Yeah, I think it's about, it goes back to 1900. We'll start by clicking songs, music. If you click music, that's our homepage. Songs is the top songs of all time, which includes all possible releases of something. So in this case, White Christmas is #1 because it's counting sheet music sales going back from World War II. It's counting Billboard charts from that time. It's counting record sales. It's counting every time White Christmas has ever appeared on a release, basically. Not quite every time, because I don't know his data set. I'm sure doesn't include the entirety of every record in the world ever. But when you look at the chart entries here, that includes all of your, all of his stored information. So this will tell you here exactly what he has used to calculate this particular entry. So that's the reason White Christmas is #1 is because it has been covered. It's been included on a zillion Christmas albums. So this is the song that has gotten around most worldwide since 1900. And scrolling down, you can see more of that. If you click on the title, that will show you some of the different successful recordings of it and in order of prominence. So Bing Crosby, of course, is number 1, followed by Frank Sinatra. So you can see when it was popular for covers, which ones did better and where. You can see in the source here, some of them were US only, some UK only, one only in Sweden. So this system is a little bit of a labyrinth to navigate, I find, just to warn you, but it's really fascinating to dig through. If you click on the year, this will show you the song or the album, depending on which era you were in before, for that year. So here we have a ranking of the top songs from 1942. If you go click on the artist name, this is going to show you, again, songs, because we're in songs. This shows you that artist's most successful songs, or most impactful, I should say, over an order of success and then the year. And again, he has a lot of the methodology and things explained up here. If you go to song artists, this shows you let me make sure I'm explaining this clearly. This is showing you the most successful song as tied to one particular artist and release. So in this case, the most successful song artist of all time is the Beatles with Hey Jude. And if you're looking at the charts, Hey Jude definitely was their number 1 single by a big margin, even exclusive of reissues later in the 70s. So when we're looking at this, this is only at the original run. So as he explains in the top, this is not any anthology, inclusion, soundtracks, things like that. So this is pretty much just the original single release. Where song titles differs is that it's purely by title, nothing to do with the artist. So he's calculating the most common or successful song titles over time. In this case, there have been more songs called Crazy than any others, apparently, at least as far as hits go. What the artist that you see is the artist who had the most successful song called Crazy. So in this case, it was Gnarls Barkley. And when you click the title, you'll be able to see the others. Song charts is the source information, and then albums is roughly the same. Click on albums, and this is the albums for all time. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's 1967 will be the number 1 album for all time, just over Thriller. I'm not sure how recently he's updated these, maybe a year or 2 ago, but getting into some of these album and song charts, you should be seeing Drake and Nickelback and some of the other things pretty higher up. Even though they like Drake, even though he's a newer artist, I guess with the digital song era, he has sold so many units of things. He has just put out so much. He has shattered all the records. He always has stuff on the charts. So he should definitely be appearing here in future calculations. Album years is the same deal. This shows you the number 1 song year by year. Okay, so we're current through 2018 for the impact system. You see the number 1 song for each year. 2009 was Taylor Swift. Album, Fearless. If you click on the year, you'll see the other ranking of albums for that year, and you can also navigate by decade here in the small text menu in the top. So if I wanted to view the 90s, I can look at the 90s as a whole. So hey, what do you know? The number 1 album of the 90s was Metallica, and the number 2 album was Nevermind. He also has these little tables on each page as another kind of quick reference. From the decade, you can narrow down here in this text menu to individual years, 92, 93. So the number 1 album of 93 was the Bodyguard soundtrack for Whitney Houston. Nirvana, number 4. Janet Jackson, number 5. I remember when that album came out. And if you navigate, so back to the 50s for this, because that's when albums were counted more in the charts. Album charts shows you the source information, and site index will be very useful to you in navigation. For if you don't remember how to find something, I would suggest looking here. And also the home page, he has this really great list of frequently asked questions that can help give you some advice on how you can use the system, or even just as curiosity if you want to nerd out over it. So if you want, and some of these are individual answers actually that he's prepared. It's not just taking you to a random page. So if you want to know what the number one song was on the day I was born, you can browse the system and find that. But if you click on here, he has prepared a nice table to show you all kinds of different statistics for these things. So for me, I was born in March of '83. And what you will get if you try to go through this is a table by country of the number one songs. Over the top, you've got the chronological order. So from the 5th to the 31st, the number one song in the US was Michael Jackson, Billie Jean. Which is, I would have to, I'm curious how he compares that, because in other calculations, I think Thriller might be. But I could be wrong about that. So lots of fun stuff to explore. These facts can give you some answers, but also just give you some inspiration for how you can use this information. There's stuff like, what was the greatest chart album of all time? Which artists had the longest careers? So chart album. Here there's another table. This is going to be pretty similar to the album's total list. And let's try which artists had the longest careers. So this is showing you some of the chart entries, because the Billboard charts do go back quite far, even though they are a little bit spotty and hard to access, so we don't have those in the data system. All right, so I believe that covers all of Impact. Let me look for any final questions. Okay, nothing new. Thank you so much, everyone who has bared with us. Let me put up the last slide of contact information just so you'll have that. Okay, just to be quick, I'll go for the non-presentation mode here. Lastly, okay, contact information. Sorry, you're viewing my non-presentation. This here has our email address, sales@academicwriterspress.com. Our website is musicidhub.com. And we also have a growing social media presence here, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, Humanities Commons. Please join my community. It's free. Please join. The social media is fairly new, so don't be put off if you don't see a lot of content there yet. We are using it, but we're just getting started with it. But connect with us there to find out about any future events, updates to the system, if we're going to be at a conference, so you can talk to us, get demos. Be in touch with us. You can go to the website, musicidhub.com, to be in touch, to arrange some demos. If you have colleagues who might like to be introduced to the system, if you want to introduce your library to it or request that your university have it, the best thing to do is usually just to email your head librarian and let them know that there's this resource that if you think you can use it for your students or for courses, tell the library that your department needs it. Of course, department budgets can also be used. So if you have someone who wants to subscribe, put them in touch, put us in touch, just connect, we'll find a way. We already know most of the librarians around, but your requests to the librarians are one of the biggest helps, because they subscribe to the resources that you need for your students. Those of you who are faculty and the students, if you need something for your research to complete research, definitely talk to your department and they can see what can be done, or contact us. We're flexible, we're a small company, and we are most importantly here to help all of you. I want the product to grow for my own selfish reasons, because I want it to survive, because I want to keep using it. So I want as many people as possible to find it and use it and have access to help your research and to help let us continue to grow to be bigger and better, so that we can do even more fun stuff with the database. We have some really cool stuff coming down the pipeline within the coming year that I'm super excited about, that will really make it expand the functionality. So great, please get in touch with me. You can get in touch, sales Academic Rights Press or community at Academic Rights Press. We'll be happy to help you with any questions. We can share this workshop with you afterwards so that you can review it. And please enjoy being able to access the system through July 1st. If you have any issues with it, you need support, get in touch. We're here for you. And yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us. I see a lot of you who started out who had managed to stay on. I appreciate your enthusiasm staying with us. And when I get back to Zoom, I will be able to end the meeting. Here, stop share. That's what I have to do. Sorry, at this point, my brain is tired. Let me see if there's any additional Q&A. No. Okay, great. All right, I think we're signing off now. Thank you so much, everyone. We will send you a follow-up email just to remind you of how you can get in touch and any information that you might need.